So your favorite heater or heaters are working great and doing their job, so much so that you probably haven't given them a second thought as to what happens if things go wrong. However, what does happen if your heater's temp probe isn't submerged? For that matter, where the heck is the temp probe on a heater like this anyway? What do you do if your sump runs dry and your heater isn't submerged at all? Will your heater be enough to keep up if your home's furnace goes out, or worse yet, will it overheat your tank if your AC gives out? Our heaters are one of the only critical pieces of life support gear in our tanks that powers up and down upwards of 1,400 times a day or 500,000 times a year, regardless of how long your heater's been working for you. By just acknowledging that it has a limited lifespan and being prepared if and when that lifespan comes to an end, you can help ensure that your tank won't have a limited lifespan as well. In today's Master Your Neptune Apex episode, I'll show you how to be prepared for the inevitable and make sure that none of these heater issues will be your problem, because the Apex can help you catch them early, notify you immediately, and solve many of them for you. Hey guys, Randy here with the BRStv guide to mastering your Neptune Apex controller, where we show you how to use the Apex to improve your equipment's performance and avoid a ton of inevitable issues that all of us reefers face. An overheated or underheated tank is one of the most talked about issues that reefers face because it's a silent killer that many times is difficult to tell just by looking at the tank, where everything's going great until the moment that it's not. Today's all about those heater protections and safeguards, how to solve obvious and not so obvious heater issues, and a few tips to protect your tank and your home's heating and cooling appliances from temperature failures, even if you're dead asleep. Early in my reefing hobby, I was just like most reefers who tossed the heater in the sump that fit my space, fit my budget, and fit my tank to maintain as close to 78 degrees as possible. Once it was working as intended, I really never gave it another thought, just blindly trusted that it would keep doing its job without fail. What I didn't consider was what would happen to your tank if the AC or furnace went out, like somebody shut it off or opened a window, or what would happen if your heater stopped working altogether, or worse yet, got stuck on, and how long would it take before you notice either one of those? What if somebody bumped or messed with the controls? What if the internal components wore out and it wasn't accurate anymore? What if a little temperature probe came out of the water? What if your heater became exposed in the sump? Would it melt the sump, destroy the heater, or even leach contaminants like copper back into the tank? Or worst of all, could a malfunctioning or damaged heater destroy my home? Instead of waiting for the inevitable to happen, today I'll walk you through using the Apex to not just anticipate and avoid over or underheating your tank, but also how to avoid a myriad of potential other heater issues that have always lingered in the back of our minds, but we've never really actively done something about. Even some potential issues that you almost certainly haven't thought of before. Before we get started setting up our Apex heater protections, if you've seen our top 20 heater mistakes video, you'll know that we recommend using two medium-sized heaters for redundancy that each on their own are capable of maintaining 75% of your target tank temp. You can check out that episode to dive into the reasoning behind our recommendation, but the next steps will assume that you followed our advice and get right to the Apex heater task function to maintain your tank temp within a super stable ½ degree window. After your heater's plugged into your EB832 outlet, click on the task clipboard icon in the top of your dashboard, search for the heater task, or scroll until you find it. Choose the outlet, rename it something easy like Heater 1, select your temp probe, and set your min and max temp range for control. The Apex will set your default min and max temp range to 78 and 79, but for even tighter stability, I like to set my maximum temperature to 78.5 degrees, meaning if the tank temp falls below 78, the heater will turn on, and when it rises above 78.5, it will turn off. Now to back this up and add redundancy, just set your heater 2 degrees higher than your Apex outlet, and if for some reason your Apex were to fail, the heater's own thermostat would trigger and turn the heater off. It is a pretty rare event that the Apex will functionally fail, and more likely an accidental issue that we caused, like the Apex temp probe got pulled out of the tank and is not submerged, or that we accidentally toggled the heater outlet on. But with the heater backing up the apex, your tank is protected. Another quick note here, although it is possible to adjust that min and max window to as little as 1/10 of a degree, it's best to resist the temptation because turning your gear on and off 5 times more puts unnecessary wear on the internal components of both the apex and your heater. You can follow that exact same process for your second redundant heater, trusting that if one of your heaters ever failed, and since they're only capable of 75% of your target temp, the backup heater would be able to keep some heat in the tank rather than the tank temp dropping too low. However, the real value is knowing that something's out of whack in the first place as soon as possible, which we will tackle next by setting up temp probe alarms. To set up your temp probe alarms, search for or find the probe alarm task function, choose your temp probe, and choose your min and max temp for alerts if your tank falls outside of those ranges. I like to tighten those default alarm ranges closer to my actual target tank temp range, with the minimum set to 77 and the max to 79, which sends you an email, text, or notification if your apex outlet is stuck on and you're now relying on that heater thermostat backup itself. I also suggest using the Apex temp swing graphs or logging to hone those temp alerts in for your own tank's normal ranges. A temperature probe alarm is the most useful and beneficial protection you can set up for your tank because it will not only tell you when there's an issue actively happening, but more importantly, you can use them to help troubleshoot the cause of the issue, like if you accidentally toggled that heater outlet on, or if your Apex temp probe came out of the water, or if it's another piece of gear altogether. You can also use the temp alarms as your canary for your home's heating and cooling appliances, which I'll touch on in more detail a bit later. But now, once you get a high or low temp alarm, you can act quickly to manually toggle the outlets on or off, or to solve the issue with the Apex automatically doing the work for you with temperature-controlled actions. Because we use the heater task function to set up the min and max temperature control for your heater outlets, you don't need to worry about adding any additional lines to them, but if you wanted to automatically have a fan or chiller turn on to cool down your tank if it rose above your alarm, you could add in a line like I did for my fan outlet that says if temp greater than symbol 80, then on. Once the tank falls below 80 degrees, the fan will turn off again. I think this type of on-off control really shines when you apply it to emergency notifications. Because the tank temperature is so mission critical to your tank, instead of just a temp alert to your phone or email, you could set up a super loud radio or siren to activate when the temperatures have climbed higher than normal, which is a sure way to wake you up in the event of emergency, eliminate the chances that you miss a temp alarm notifications, or decrease the possibility that you wake up to a disaster. Following that same mindset of the more alerts and notifications, the better, we can use power monitoring as an additional way to alert you when your heater's not functioning properly. With power monitoring active for your heater outlets, you will get an alert if your Apex tells the heater to be on and the heater doesn't respond or draw power. To set up power monitoring, just find the power usage alarm task, choose your heater outlet, and choose your low and high wattage draw levels. Let's discuss the temperature probe calibration in the list of Apex task functions and how it can be a problem solver as well. We've conducted multiple BRStv Investigates heater tests and have come to find that most heaters on the market can't be trusted to read accurately, meaning that setting them to 78 degrees doesn't always mean that they'll actually reach 78 degrees, but oftentimes a few degrees higher or a few degrees lower than that. Since many heaters available to us also don't have onboard calibration options, sometimes the only way that you can account for this inaccuracy is to test them with a trusted temperature probe and set the heater higher or lower to account for the difference. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that the Apex can't solve this for you directly, but because the Apex temp probe is calibratable and more trustworthy than your $30 heater, you can use it as a tool to help compensate for any heater's deficiency and trust that the Apex alerts, notifications, and actions based on temperature are accurate and far more reliable. To calibrate your temp probe accurately using the temp probe calibration task function, pick up a HANA thermometer or NIST certified thermometer like these, or take the average of 2 to 3 kitchen thermometers and enter the temp into the Apex task function and hit send, and your Apex is now calibrated to the correct temp. Outside of the Apex task functions to protect against heater-related issues, I've got 3 additional Apex accessories and add-ons that we can also implement to help put heater-related worries to bed. Those being an optical sensor to turn your heater off before it gets exposed to air, a PM1 or PM2 module for additional temp probes to monitor the tank or the ambient room temp, and a magnetic probe rack, which is far safer and more reliable than letting your probe dangle in the sump. I think it's pretty clear how keeping your Apex temp probe securely submerged is far better than letting it hang free in the sump, especially when the cord gets pulled accidentally and exposes the temp probe, which is something that almost certainly will happen at some point and likely more times than one if you don't secure it. So that's the benefit of installing your temp probe into the magnetic probe rack with the threaded screw. But what's not as clear to most reefers is what a second temp probe can do to add safety and redundancy by monitoring your display tank and sump separately in case they were disconnected from a failed return pump, or by monitoring your tank's true temperature regulator, your home's AC or furnace. What happens if your return pump stops working, which means your display tank has become separated from its life support equipment in the sump? Your temp probe and heater might tell you it's functioning normally inside the sump, while your tank's temp slowly drops. What about if somebody in the house turns your AC or furnace off or opens a window, letting in hot or cold air? All of these are something that you can catch and solve immediately with another temperature probe added to your Apex. Whether you use a PM1 or PM2 module to add your second temp probe, you can set up alerts and notifications just like we did for our main temp probe using Probe Alarm Task, with the goal in mind of what your second probe is measuring. In the probe alarm task function, you'll see your main probe as base temp, and your second probe will show as something different like mine does here. If you're using one in your sump and one in your display, I would recommend setting the probe alarm minimum and maximum ranges to the same 77 and 79. However, if you plan to monitor the temperature of your room, you might consider adjusting them slightly higher or lower depending on what you want to be alerted to. For ambient room temp, I recommend notifications for temps under 65 degrees and over 75 degrees, which you can adjust to your needs, but serves as a strong indication that either something is wrong with your heating and cooling appliances or if they are off when they shouldn't be. Because an exposed heater is the fastest path to catastrophic failure, using an optical sensor can save your tank and home from damage by automatically turning your heater outlets off if a low water level is detected. So to add this Apex protection to your toolkit, you can install an optical sensor to an FMM module on its own, or to your leak detection kit, flow monitoring kit, or auto top-off kit if you already have them. Then add in a new line to your heater outlet that says, if Optic 3 open, then off. Your sensor name will probably look different if you didn't rename them beforehand, which I did by pulling down the 4 sensors from my FMM to my dashboard and renaming them according to which port they were plugged into, such as Leak 1, Leak 2, Optic 3, and Flow 4. However, just like your return pump I showed you how to protect in the previous video, your heater will now turn off if your sump water level falls below critical depths before the heater hits the air. This isn't the first time that we found a super helpful use for these Apex optical sensors. Actually, in this return pump Master Your Apex video here, they saved our floors and our pumps from catastrophic damage. I highly recommend seeing how that went down for yourself, or binge watch all of the Master Your Neptune Apex series over here to see the other tips, tricks, and hacks that you can do with your Apex.